All right, all right, all right. Good evening, everyone. I see that we have some guests with us on our Zoom call. All right, so everyone, just so you know, the call has already begun recording. So we're gonna go ahead and get started. First and foremost, my name is Marcia Noel, Assistant to the City Manager, and I will be moderating our community meeting tonight about our charter amendments. We want to thank everybody that's joined us, everyone who will be watching on TV 18, Facebook, YouTube. You could have been somewhere else tonight, but instead you chose to join us this evening on a very important topic, which are those charter amendments, which you will see on your March 9th election ballot. As you may or may not be aware, we do have two candidates running for your City Council District 4 seat. So if you want more information about what we've already put out on the two candidates that are running and on the charter amendments, you can go to rivierabeach.org/vote. We've put up so much information, supplemental information that you can look at, such as videos, links to any publications, even information on joining this meeting is on that webpage so that you can look at it and use it as the information you'll need to make a decision. So with that being said, I also want to let everybody know that currently, in terms of what we've planned for tonight's forum, we're going to start off with some initial remarks. We'll then open up the floor for any questions from anyone that has joined us on this Zoom call. We really want this to be an opportunity to engage directly with you. This is going to be more so of a casual conversation or a dialogue, because by the end of the day, we want to hear what you think and maybe what your concerns or questions are. We have received some questions from the community, and we've made sure to compile those because we want to make sure that we address those as well. And so this evening we have with ourselves our city manager, Mr. Jonathan Evans, our city attorney, Ms. Dawn Nguyen, who will be primarily responding to many of the questions that you may have about the charter amendments. We will stick on the topic of the charter amendments. And as your moderator, I'll be facilitating the conversation. If you have joined us, all we ask is that until we get to the Q&A that you just remain on mute. You do have the ability to unmute, but we ask that you remain muted until there's an opportunity to provide the question, and I'll make sure to let you know when that is. If you have joined us or are watching this on TV 18, social media, and you have questions for us and you weren't able to participate in this call, please be aware that there is another community meeting on this very same topic next week, March 1st. It's going to be in person at the Riviera Beach Marina Event Center. Information is on the website. Again, that's rivierabeach.org/vote. It's at 6 p.m. There is a limited capacity, so make sure that you go to the website so that you can register so that we know to prepare for your attendance. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and get straight into it. This is scheduled for about an hour and a half. We want to utilize as much time as possible to engage with you. This is your forum. This is your opportunity to engage. We understand that there's individuals who have tons of questions or may not have much questions at all and just want to know what's going on. So get out of this what you may. I think it's important to also preface that this is primarily informational. We are not here to persuade anyone on a decision as to what you're going to do in regards to these charter amendments, but it's up to you to make that decision. We just want to provide all the contextual or historical information and answer any questions pertaining to that topic, okay? So with that being said, I'll first start with stating what those amendments are. We've already begun sharing a lot of information through various communication platforms, just so everyone is aware. We've sent out letters like this. You've probably received it through the mail, and I'm sorry, it's kind of spotty. Technology is a little funny sometimes, but we've sent out over 12,000 letters to 12,000 addresses. We've handed out 1,000 of these flyers to include the Charter Amendment community meeting that you're on tonight at our various vaccination opportunities that were held at Wells Recreation. We have dozens of signage that's going up even as we speak. We've sent out over 2,000 email blasts to everyone that signed up on our e-newsletters to let them know about the election, let them know about the charter amendments. And so we also encourage you to let others know in your community, your neighbors, your family, your friends, let them know about what's going on. We're gonna make sure that this forum is recorded, that all of them are recorded, and that they're shared, and that they're saved on our YouTube, our Facebook, and that they circulate through our TV18, so that anyone who have not had a chance to join us here can still obtain that information from online. And so we want you to be the extra hands and feet and the voices out there to let others know about what's going on. So just before we begin, I'm gonna go ahead and read those amendments and basically what we've already handed out, and to everyone, so that you're aware of what we've already shared. And so the first amendment that we're going to talk about is the one stated is adoption of state law, local improvements. And basically it states the repeal of special amendments that require 50% of the cost of all street and secondary drainage improvements to be paid by the benefited property owner. And so basically what that means is that the city charter currently provides that 50% of the cost of certain street and drainage improvements shall be paid by the benefited property owner. It is proposed that the charter be amended to repeal the requirement that 50% of the cost of all street and secondary drainage improvements be paid by the benefited property owner, and that the council may determine the assessments for curbs, gutters, valley gutters, and sidewalks. This means that, if adopted, there will be no longer a requirement that 50% of the cost of all street and secondary drainage improvements be paid by the benefited property owner. Charter Amendment number 2 that we're going to discuss, and it states establishment or abolition of city departments, creation of charter departments. And it states the police and fire departments shall be considered charter departments and shall be preserved by requiring a referendum vote of the electorate to abolish, outsource, and or otherwise transfer the city's provisions of law enforcement and fire services to any other entity. What does this mean? The city council shall have the authority to establish or abolish any city department or office other than the police and fire departments by ordinance or by adoption of the budget. The police and fire departments shall be considered charter departments and shall only be abolished subject to the approval of the electors of the city. Now, I know that sounds like a mouthful, but nonetheless, we've allocated enough time to talk about this. So with that being said, I think it's appropriate that we kind of start with some context. And so the first question I have, and this is directed to our city manager, is how did these charter amendments begin? Why is it that we are seeing this now? And what's the intent behind it? So Mr. Evans?
Thank you, Ms. Noel, and members of the community and the city attorney for participating in such an important discussion with regards to our charter. As you all are aware, the charter is an important document in the city of Riviera Beach and for any government entity. So this particular First Amendment came through discussions with the board. The discussion started as early as November of last year, when we started having discussions with regards to what are some things that we need to clean up with respect to our charter. Our charter is our document that really establishes the roles and responsibilities of government and what are some of the things that we need to know to be able to be a functioning entity. So this particular provision speaks on roadway improvements, infrastructure associated with roadway projects that a particular property owner is going to see a benefit from. So an example would be is that you may have a roadway in front of your home that is in a state of disrepair, and the city needs to come in and move forward with a capital construction project to repave the roadway in your neighborhood, and that may be multiple streets. Well, that project may cost anywhere between $3 to $8 million in some cases. As it stands right now, the provision in the charter requires, and as Ms. Noel communicated, the shall component requires the city to assess the benefiting property owners 50% of the cost for the roadway improvements and the secondary drainage improvements. So your valley gutters, your curbs, all those other elements are intended to be assessed to the property owners. So if you're just looking at a specific stretch of roadway, and I did some quick math. So let's say a roadway project is a $4 million project. If you were to say half of that would be a cost that would be absorbed by the benefiting property owners, that's $2 million. The city then would determine the cost for that $2 million and how it would be apportioned across the individuals that are benefiting from the investment. So let's say it's 100 homes. So 100 homes would be assessed a $20,000 assessment for a period of, let's just say, 15 years. At 15 years, you're looking at paying roughly about $100 a year for a 15-year period, to the tune of over $20,000 for the roadway improvements in front of your home. And if any of us have ever been involved in roadway construction or construction nonetheless, there's going to be additional improvements that will be contemplated in subsequent years. You would hope that a roadway project lasts for 40 or 50 years, but there's resurfacing, there's additional upkeep and maintenance. And as stormwater regulations change, there's an additional investments that have to occur. The reason that we're having this discussion and asking for the community to consider looking to modify the language in the charter is right now, we are not in compliance with the charter. Since the 1980s, this was the last time that this provision was executed. But as you all know at this particular point, the charter is basically our constitution. And nobody from the agency wants to run afoul to the documents that establish how we are supposed to be looking at governing ourselves. So through multiple discussions with the elected officials and after conversations, we then brought forward an ordinance that allowed for us to present this to the voters. Government has changed profoundly since this particular provision was in place. It is my opinion, and my opinion alone, that this particular provision was in place when the city was probably a lot smaller and maybe did not have the financial means that it has today. So in order to address some of the roadway projects and some of the drainage improvements, there would be a situation whereby the community would say, okay, City of Riviera Beach, we'll pay half the cost associated with the project to help facilitate the project because we know that the means of the agency may not be there. But as we have grown as an agency and as we have grown as a municipal government, these types of provisions, you would be hard pressed to find it where it speaks to roadway projects and infrastructure projects that are considered core municipal projects and initiatives. So that's why we're asking for the voters to consider looking to remove that particular provision, because as roadway projects have been done since the 1980s, we've gone out for bond financing. We find the means through stormwater assessments to cobble together the money to effectively move forward with these types of projects. We get revenue from property taxes, and that money is used to pledge against the bond proceeds so we can do the projects. So the mechanism in which we do our roadway projects have changed. And so in light of that change, we wanted to bring that item before the voters for consideration because it's not a mechanism that we utilize. And plus, we don't want to have something on the books that is counter to the way in which we do business.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. So with that being said, I do want to open up the floor to anyone that's joined us here on Zoom that may have a question in regards to what was just said or anything else regarding that particular charter amendment. So if you do, feel free to unmute yourself or you can share your comments or your question through the chat box, which you should see at your toolbar at the bottom. All right, and if there are no questions, then we can kind of move on to some other questions. All right, so with that being said, I wanted to move on to the second charter amendment in regards to the creation of charter departments, in particular police and fire, which was stated earlier as I shared. So one of the questions that I've heard in the community about that particular charter amendment is that, why is it that we're considering making the fire and police department charter amendments? Because essentially that's what it's proposing.
Right. So the thought process with regards to making public safety, police and fire charter departments is that those are your um, public safety related departments, and those are departments in other entities and other agencies that you usually see become charter departments. That ensures that those departments are always a part of the city's operational plan. Right now, as it stands, the elected officials, the city council, has the ability to establish, modify, tweak, and contract out any service that the city of Riviera Beach provides. This particular charter amendment is recommending that both the police and the fire department become charter departments. And in order to put something in the charter, it takes the voters. And in order to remove something, it takes the voters. So what happens with this particular charter provision, if it does pass, it would require the voters to abolish, modify, or tweak those public safety departments. And so the intent behind that is to ensure that we as a city always hold on to our public safety departments as core municipal departments. Now, there has been conversations and discussions with regards to other departments in essence becoming charter departments or being mentioned in subsequent amendments. That's not something that we're opposed to. We just didn't want to put too much out there for the voters because this is very complicated and in some cases confusing. Some persons may think that it's actually the contrary, that by putting these particular departments in the charter, it makes it easier to contract out or to modify or to tweak. It actually makes it inherently more challenging to do that. And so by putting these as a charter department, it ensures that unless the voters choose to modify their departments, police or fire, to abolish or to contract out, the voters will make that decision. And so it's a very prescribed process that would have to be followed, as opposed to right now, it only require a majority vote of the city council to do that, and that's 3 elected officials. So we thought that this was a way to ensure that our public safety departments are incorporated in the charter and remain in the charter until the voters direct the community otherwise. And so it's actually giving more authority and power to the actual voters and taking that out of the responsibility of the elected officials.
All right, thank you for that explanation. Now, if there are any comments or questions to that, feel free to use this time to ask that question. You can unmute yourself, like I said. Does anyone have a question?
Ms. Noel?
Yep.
Evans, good evening, community also. I'd like to add that one of the other reasons that we haven't considered other departments, for instance, the utility district, is that it's already a charter department. So in order to abolish, for instance, the utility district and go back to the old way of handling our utility, we would have to abide by state statute and go through the mechanism to change it from a charter department to a non-charter department. So there's no need to do it now. It would be redundant because it is a charter department.
And Ms. Noel, also, I want to communicate something that I think resonates with a lot of members in our community. In 1994, 1995, when the solid waste operations was contracted out by the city of Riviera Beach, had this provision been in place and had that department or function been a charter department, the voters would be the only one that could have authorized the contracting out of that service. And so that just shows you that these particular provisions requires a lot more work and a lot more effort and a lot more energy to educate and inform the community with regards to if there's going to be any changes with respect to the philosophical discussion on how the community is to move forward. So I think it's important to tie that distinction in. Had that provision been in place for our solid waste operations, the voters would have ultimately selected.
All right. That's actually a good point. And to that note that you just mentioned there, so when you mentioned that, hey, why is it that we haven't considered other departments? And thank you, Ms. Nguyen, for speaking to USD, because I know that that's of interest from, some individuals in our community. But for instance, for public works or any other operations, as we would not necessarily want to present that now because of the complexities associated with having too many charter amendments to make other options fall under that. Could we anticipate, something in the future for departments like Public Works and those critical operations as well? Would that be something we'd consider in the future or something?
Certainly, I think that's a discussion that we would have with the board. And if the board and the Charter Review Committee are to convene to look at other elements associated with our charter, it's not something that we would be opposed to, and we would help facilitate it as much as possible if that's the desire of the elected body as well as the community to see that particular department come forward.
I have a quick question. So the way that it's phrased, it would have to go to the voters to abolish, outsource, or otherwise transfer these charter departments. What about creating new ones? So if a new fire department, or does this mean like the local building, like a new station? If a new station needed to be created, would that also have to go to the voters?
That's a great question. It's specific to the operational element. So it's strictly to the personnel and the resources. It's not as it relates to capital projects and purchasing apparatus. That's more of the operational side. This is just saying that we want to have a fire department that is City of Riviera Beach employee, or that's a City of Riviera Beach department in perpetuity.
So the operational decisions about when to open a new one, or purchasing equipment, or hiring more personnel, or laying off personnel, that all remains within the department itself.
That all remains in the responsibilities of city administration and working with the department. So what happens is, if this particular provision passes, then it just says that we can't transfer, terminate. We're not going to do fire services. Palm Beach County is going to come in here and do it. You couldn't do that if this particular provision passes. But the operational decision as to how many fire stations, how many firefighters, who's hired, who's fired, those types of things still remain in the management responsibility of the city manager and fire chief.
Thank you for clarifying.
No problem.
All right, that was a good question. Anyone else? All right, either we're doing a really good job explaining this, or we haven't thought of more questions yet. So if there's no further questions, I do have a few more. And again, a lot of these questions we compiled based off of what we're hearing and what we've been told from members of the community. And so I'm basically speaking to that. So another question is about the charter amendment process. So like you stated, Mr. Evans, the city's charter is a very important document. And as we've noted in our publication, it's similar to the US Constitution or the state constitution, right? It basically informs how we're going to govern ourselves as a governmental entity. And so to Ms. Nguyen, this is directed to you, but how does the charter amendment process work, and how was the charter established? I do want to preface by saying that we have started this process, particularly on these amendments, late into last year, starting as early as to November, in terms of us discussing these items before it got brought to everybody and publicized in preparation for this election. But I do want Ms. Nguyen to kind of speak on some of the details associated with that process, if you can.
Sure. As Mr. Evans had stated, the charter is like the Constitution for a city or even for a county. It's the governing document for the city. And after the charter, then you have ordinances or resolutions that could be adopted by the city council. In our charter, we have two methods of adopting the charter or having charter amendments. One is a citizen's petition or a citizen's initiative, where the citizens start that process. So you all may recall that in, I believe, 2019, we had a charter review committee, and that committee came up with I think about 4 charter amendments that were passed by the voters. So that's one way of doing it. This time we have started the charter referendum process where the council has put forth the charter amendments. But the voters are the only ones who get to decide whether or not they pass. And so that's why you will see these 2 charter amendments on the ballot on March 9th.
All right, are there any thoughts, questions on that from anyone? All
Just
right.
a comment.
Yep, go ahead.
Just a comment. I think this to have this form and this way, and also have it at the marina, is a very good project, because it gets the residents a chance to hear again what these amendments stand for, and what, if you voted no, what the results would be. And I think this is a very good, and I thank Mr. Evans, Dr. Evans, for bringing this, and also you, Ms. Marshall, and also the city attorney, Ms. Nguyen, for bringing this program to us, this forum. It's very educational, and I talked to my neighbors and gave them, in case they didn't get a flyer, which something many of them said they did, and I told them, please tune in, and I think they are. But thank you so much for bringing this to the forefront for all of us, so we can get a clearer understanding.
Thank you, Ms. Polk. And I know this is Ms. Polk because she is like a community champion. If anyone's going to show up, even when we don't think one is, Ms. Doretta Polk will. So thank you, because you give us confidence, really do.
I tried. You're all doing a marvelous job. You're doing a marvelous job, every one of you.
Thank you. And to that point, we made sure to offer 2 different options because we are in a pandemic, obviously. And so those who aren't able to show up physically, you can do the virtual option. But even if you do the physical option, we will be, instituting our CDC guidelines, such as temperature checks, social distancing, masks being required. So even still, if you have questions after tonight and you want to ask them at the physical meeting, you can still do that. Again, I just ask that you register online. Just go to rivierabeach.org/vote, because we need to know how many people will show up in preparation. So with that, I don't have any additional questions. I think what I've asked is basically the common questions that we're hearing out there. If there are any other questions that you've heard in the community and you've joined us here, feel free to ask those questions as well if it piques your interest. If not, and you want to ask later, you can send a question to our email. You can email citymanagersoffice@rivierabeach.org. Again, it's city managers with an S, office@rivierabeach.org, and we'd be more than happy to reply to your email. And so with that, if there are any final remarks from the city manager or our city attorney, please go ahead and feel free.
I will defer to Ms. Nguyen, ladies first, and then I'll close this out.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. The one thing that I want to bring up that Mr. Evans didn't really touch on, that I think the voters need to know, is that that provision dealing with the 50% local improvements came as a result. It's found in Florida statute, and the statute says just what our charter says, which is that 50% of local improvements shall be assessed to the benefited property owner. What we haven't really discussed here is that the statute also says that if that were to occur, so that the example that Mr. Evans gave about the $2 million assessment on 100 homes at 100 would be about, I believe you said $100 a year, Mr. Evans. It would also require 8% interest if you did not pay on time. Or if we use bond money instead of just the cities out of the city's coffers, it would be required to be 1% over the interest required on the bond. So whatever that is. In the event that a property owner couldn't pay that, the city could foreclose on their property just like you could on a mortgage, notwithstanding the fact that the property is homesteaded. So it's almost as if the city at that point is treated like a bank. And if you don't pay your mortgage, you know what happens. And the same thing would happen with this assessment. And so I wanted to make sure that everyone was clear regarding what the outcome could be if, in fact, we had to have these assessments against the property.
Oh, thank you, Mrs. Nguyen.
You're
Oh, my
welcome.
goodness.
And
Oh,
And I think that's so important to, and
yes,
thank you
yes.
for bringing that up, because, you know, when we look at these particular charter amendments and you're looking to amend the constitution of the city, there's always a perception as to, well, why are they trying to do this? Well, the reason that we're trying to make these modifications is that we believe that these modifications speak to some operational things that we're seeing, and it's only prudent for us to bring these before the voters for consideration.
Yes.
And so these sessions are so important to have the discussion and conversation as to how we can look to educate and inform the voters, because actually, and Ms. Nguyen, thank you for bringing that up. This actually went before the voters, I believe, in 2015, and I think
The last that I saw was 2008.
2008, correction. So 2008, and did not pass. And so, you know, when you look at those types of things, you don't know as far as, you know, the reasoning behind that, but we wanted to make sure that we did as much as we possibly could to educate and inform the voters as to what these particular charter provisions mean. And the other side of it is that there is actually a state law that prohibits local government from telling you how to vote on these charter amendments or anything that's presented to the voters. This was something that came into existence when a lot of communities were voting against, or were telling their community to vote against certain things that were being proposed on the ballot, and was coming down from Tallahassee as it relates to changes and operational things. So the state legislature didn't like that, and they put in a law that says that we are only to communicate factual information to the voters to make an informed decision. And so, as you know, as your government representatives, we can only tell you that in the event that this passes or doesn't pass, this is what the impacts would be. We do have that face-to-face meeting that will occur, but we also are encouraging persons, if you have an HOA meeting or a church meeting and you still would like for staff to provide additional information or even show up to present, we are more than willing to go wherever you are or set up a digital opportunity to educate and inform all persons, because at the end of the day, we want to make sure that you are well informed and well equipped to make an informed decision at that ballot box. And so anything that we can do to assist in facilitating that, we're going to certainly do that. Ms. Noel will provide you the information as to how to see some of the information that we've put out. There has been copious amounts of memorandums as well as ordinances, because before we even get it onto the ballot, it requires 2 readings of an ordinance to get these items to be placed on the ballot. So there's a lot of information. If you have some time to review the information, and I assure you, if you're having a challenge sleeping at night, these documents will help facilitate that without any prescription medication, because it is quite lengthy, but it's very informative, and I think will prepare you to understand what we're talking about with regards to these items. So this will be available on our website. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, do not hesitate to visit our website to ask any questions of staff, and we will make ourselves available for any Zoom or in-person meetings as much as possible between now and the election day. So I want to thank folks for tuning in, and Ms. Noel, you can wrap us up.
Thank you. Yes, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. So to Mr. Evans's point, we have a website with tons of information on it. Like I've been referencing, it's rivierabeach.org or .com in this instance, but rivierabeach.org/vote. You'll go to this webpage, and we've literally put every piece of information that we can to help you make a decision. You'll also have information about the voting locations, the request to vote by mail, which you can do. You can make that request no later than 5 p.m. on February 27th through the Palm Beach County Supervisor of Elections. But we have tons of links to videos, supplemental information, and again, information on the upcoming and last community meeting that we're going to be hosting. So with that being said, we thank everyone for joining us this evening. We look forward to seeing you again if you're going to join us at our next meeting. And again, stay connected with us. We're here to inform you and help you through this process. So have a good evening, and we hope to see you again. Good night.
Thank you.